Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Very glad to have you with us on this Wednesday morning, July the 22nd, 2026, as we continue our study of the book of Romans. And this week we're in Romans chapter 8, studying the last 14 verses of chapter 8, verses 26 through 39. Yesterday, we reflected on verses 26 and 27 concerning the Spirit praying in us. And then now today, I'd like for us to look at 28 through 30, which is the conclusion of, or the end of a section followed by the rest of the chapter, which is a kind of celebration of what he's been talking about. But let's focus this morning on verses 28 through 30 of Romans chapter 8. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn within a large family. And those whom he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. Well, there's several things going on in the Greek here that I think might help us to understand this passage a little more clearly. Traditionally, this verse 28, which is one that lots of people have committed to memory, we know that all things work together for those who love God. The traditional translation here can sometimes make it sound as if the working together, all things working together, is powered by those who love God. But the Greek is a little more direct here about these things working together, that this working together is done by God. So I think there are better translations actually of this particular verse that emphasize that the things working together is not driven by those who love God. It's not loving God that makes things work together for you, but it is God who makes those things work together for those who love God. So I think that's a bit of a slight emphasis there that can make a difference. It's also interesting that Paul actually has a term that he uses here for the first time, which is literally God lovers, that these are God lovers who are called according to God's purpose. Then we get verses 29 and 30, which are a kind of fundamental passage for the support of the doctrine of predestination. And I'm not so much opposed to predestination as a doctrine. I think as long as one can leave in the part that we don't understand and grasp. That is, if you look at this passage, even in the Greek, rather than also, it's more time bound. It's more, and then for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, then that he might be the firstborn within a large family. And those whom he predestined, he then called, and those whom he called, he then justified, and those whom he justified, he then glorified. So clearly there is a progression here that Paul is speaking of, and this is the understanding of predestination from the human perspective. That is, we understand things in time. To attribute these things happening to God, while it might be natural to explain them in terms of our perspective, I think one has to remember that the perspective of God here is transcendent of time. So we have to be very careful in describing this that we don't limit God by uh, by time. That is, certainly God is in our time-bound world, but God is not bound by our world in the way that we are. And so I'm very cautious about throwing around a lot of predestination talk because I wouldn't want people to get the idea that I thought that God himself was somehow predestined to do these things. That's not the idea. The idea is that we are subject to God. And this perspective of predestination is one that we can't completely grasp because God transcends time. And so things don't happen for God in a time bound order as they do for us. So, certainly, there's something very important about the idea of God being in our lives in such a way that these things happen to us and within us, uh, and that they do in this time bound world. But I wouldn't want to say much more than that because I wouldn't want to get into presumptions about how it is that God operates in our lives, other than to recognize that He does. Let's close with this word of prayer from Theodore Parker. O thou infinite perfection, who are the soul of all things that are, we would lift up our spirits and gather up our hearts and feel thy presence and have thee as an abiding light in our lives. We would thank thee for all the blessings thou hast given us and thy precious providence by which we live. We know that thou needest no prayer of ours to stir thee to do us good. But in the midst of things changing and passing away, in the midst of our time-bound world, our heart and our soul cry out for thee, the ever-living and true God. In the moment of our adoration, while we worship thee by prayer, may we so strengthen ourselves that we shall serve thee all our lives by a daily work which is full of obedience to thee and trust in thy perfection. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn, and I hope that you have a very good day. Goodbye.